So if that's the case, hang on, Will, hang on, Will. So if that's the case, Will, that this is just a mind state, then this also is true. Christianity is true, just like this is true because of the mind state. So if that is the case, and Christians say, well, you're not a woman, they can't be wrong. They can't.
So here in this clip, Andrew Wilson methodically dismantles the ideological framework of gender as a spectrum, calling out what he sees as contradictions and logical fallacies, from questioning whether intersex qualifies as a third sex to pushing hard on whether identity alone should dictate truth. Andrew Wilson challenges the left-leaning panel to defend their definitions. Let's get into a few key moments where Andrew Wilson absolutely shuts it down. Let's dive in and hear what Andrew Wilson has to say.
All right, you got it. And we'll give the other 9.5 minutes over to Andrew. So yeah, you have up to 9.5 minutes to make your case. And thanks again, Speakeasy, for your introduction. We appreciate you being here as well. But with that, we'll hand it over to you, Andrew. Thanks for coming on back to Modern Day Debate.
You know, you can always tell when it's going to probably be a spicy debate is when everybody has a very wrapped up, tight opening statement because they just want to get at each other and get right in the meat of things. I always like that, right? I should bloviate for 9 minutes and waste everybody's time, though, just to be a dick. But I'm not. But I'm not going to. I'm not going to. I will say to Pep Talks TV, it does seem like you are paying attention, trying to be good faith. Just remember that because we have a differing view than you, that doesn't mean that we hate trans people or what, you know what I mean? That's not actually what that means. This is the rhetoric of the Democrats that if you don't believe, you hate. So my opener, again, very brief. The they, them, we, us, Zer, Zy, pers want us to believe the dumbest thing on earth. That is that the Zy, per, Zer is a category which conveys something that isn't complete gibberish. You see, in order to be a Z, they, Zy, Zer, you must simply feel as a Z, Zer, Zy, Zer would feel. What does that feel like? Who knows? Because even if you have the exact same behavior pattern as every Z, Zer, Zy, per on planet Earth, if you identify as a they, them, or we, us, the Zy, Zers, or Z, pers have to admit you are one of the they, thems, or we, us's, and not a Zy, Zer, per Z, right? Here is what this means. It just means that the category of gender doesn't really tell us any information that we can follow coherently. Imagine if we had a chart, like a genderbread chart. And this chart had every category behavior of what is female and what is male, which of course that genderbread chart couldn't have, and it couldn't have it because you can't actually make a chart like that. If such a thing could exist, let's say theoretically, then I would just kind of like to know, what would it be pointing at? What's it pointing at on either end of the spectrum? It's going to be pointing to male. It's going to be pointing to female. When you say there's a spectrum, what's on either end of this spectrum, right? It's a binary. And so what they do is they put a decimal point inside the binary and try to pretend like this creates some sort of spectrum where there isn't one. Okay. Imagine if we had this chart and this could exist. This technically could exist. It can't. It can't exist. And I'll explain why. This gentleman you can see him doing like the destiny triangles. He can't really tell you what's going to belong inside of this list. Like if a man wears a dress, does that make him more of a woman? He would say, well, yeah, sure. If he feels like it. If a man has a purse, does that make him more of a woman? Well, sure. If he feels like that. If a woman is wearing, pants, does that make her more of a man? Well, sure, if she feels like that. Meaning that you can have somebody who has every single one of these categories, right, and says, I don't feel like that, and they aren't. Or a person who has every single one of those categories and says, I do feel like that, and they aren't. That's why it makes no sense. It's complete gibberish. Imagine, for instance, they say trans rights, right? Pep Talks TV says trans rights aren't human rights. When somebody says that, it makes Pep Talks upset. But why? You're talking about a fictitious category, not people. So like your opponents aren't talking to you about a category that they believe is even real. When we say, so this is where you live in what's called equivocation, right? You both of you live in equivocation. Because you believe that this categorization is real, you say that that's a proper human category. And we just basically say, but wait, that's not a proper human category. We still see these people as human. We just don't see that category as being valid. That's where the great equivocation comes in. They say gender is a spectrum. Gender and sex is an oversimplification, or shouldn't be an oversimplification. That's what the genderbread, which, by the way, they don't even use the genderbread anymore because it's outdated. And here's some of the reasons why it's outdated. He says an oversimplification or can't be an oversimplification. Remember, inside the nuance, what he really is claiming here is that it's just a feeling. Gender is a feeling. That's it. Well, but then he goes on to say, but it's very nuanced and complex. Well, no, the fuck it isn't. It's just how I feel. Now, but if you say that, it opens you up to all sorts of ridicule, right? For instance, if I say, oh, well, I don't feel that you're that thing you feel like you are. Why am I wrong? Well, because I don't feel like you should feel, like I shouldn't feel that way, right? It leaves you open to all sorts of criticisms that make zero sense, right? They say a person's inner opinion about themselves is what he says for the genderbread theory. There is no wrong answer, he says. So there can't be a wrong answer then about how I identify them. That can't be wrong. Do you understand? Like, if you say there's no wrong way, remember in his opening statement, quote, it's a person's interfeeling opinion about themselves. There's no wrong answer. Then there can't be a wrong answer about how I feel about their identity. Do you understand? It's the same thing. Gender doesn't have to match sex, he says. Well, yes, it does, because these are the two ends we're using for actually making these categorizations to begin with. They say sex is a spectrum, but then he goes on and he makes a massive mistake, and this is one of the reasons why the genderbread theory should be thrown out. He says that there's three sexes. No, there isn't. There's no, and he'll never find a credible scientific source anywhere that'll ever call intersex a third sex. That's insanity. There is no third sex.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but Andrew Wilson is asking the exact question everyone's thinking. Like, seriously, if you can't even define what you're feeling, how are the rest of us supposed to know what that identity even means? Andrew Wilson just put the spotlight on how vague this whole thing gets. And I mean, he's not being mean, he's just being real.
Intersex isn't asex. It refers to variations in a sex and it isn't a sex category in and of itself. It never has been. It's never been classified as one, and it still isn't. It's an umbrella term. Like, for instance, men who have their testicles shriveled due to external conditionals can be considered intersex. They're still men, right? You can't say it's a third sex. And by the way, that would bring up all sorts of problems for you if you even thought that, right? Could the third sex only breed with the third sex? Can the third sex breed with both of the other sexes? Who can the third sex have kids with? Can the third sex, oh, you know what I mean? Like, that makes no sense. They would still fall under a sex binary category for reproduction. That's why it can't be a third sex classification. That is the stupidest fucking thing that I've heard in weeks, postulated by Will, who didn't take 5 seconds to look into whether or not intersex was a sex. I want credible scientific biological classifications for intersex, which make it an actual third sex. Because to my knowledge, there's ova and there is sperm, meaning there's small gametes and there's large gametes. That's it. Is there like a medium gamete? Is there a medium gamete somewhere in there that we could classify as the third sexual gamete? That's like, what the fuck are you talking about, Will? By the way, this is why they stopped using that genderbread man in mainstream trans apologetics. You must be like out of date by a couple of years on your trans apologia, Will, because they don't even use this anymore, bro. Because of these various problems, you should get like the genderbread man 3.0 update version for trans apologia. So just pointing that out. With that, I do think it is important to be completely fair. These guys haven't been assholes yet. We're not going to be assholes to them yet, as long as they stay not being assholes. But I do think it's fair if they want to move outside even the domain of this debate of are there only two genders and get into things like transports and things like this. But we better clear up some of this stuff first to just make sure we're not even talking past each other. Because when somebody says there's a third sex, that to me sounds like the equivalent of aliens just landed on planet Earth. I mean, that is real serious breaking fucking news, ladies and gentlemen. That is something which is like an outlandishly crazy claim to say there's a third human sex, and I can't wait to hear all about it. So with that, I will yield my time over. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this debate was peak Andrew Wilson. He didn't scream, didn't get nasty. He just out-logicked the entire room. From the shaky third sex claims to the whole respect the identity or else argument, Andrew Wilson held the line and used straight-up reasoning to expose the inconsistencies. Whether you agree with him or not, you've got to admit he came prepared, stayed calm, and made the other side squirm without even raising his voice.